when celebrated chef Dominic Laurent mocked humble kitchen assistant Elena Torres to cook as a jest, he expected a laughable failure. What happened next stunned everyone in that opulent dining hall. Sometimes the most extraordinary talents hide behind the plainest faces, and one moment can reshape everything forever. Have you ever underestimated someone, only to be proven wrong? Or found brilliance in an unexpected place? Share your stories below, and if this tale of triumph moves you, hit that like button, share with friends, and subscribe with the bell icon for more inspiring journeys. Your support brings these stories to life. Golden candelabras bathe the polished marble floors of Lucille, Paris's temple of haute cuisine, in a warm, amber glow. Crystal goblets clinked softly as elegantly dressed guests, food critics, tycoons, and culinary luminaries mingled before the evening's grand event. This wasn't just any restaurant. It was where gastronomic legends were forged and careers were made. Dominic Laurent adjusted his silk tie, his silver-flecked hair impeccably styled. At 52, he commanded reverence wherever fine dining was cherished. Tonight's culinary contest, pitting young chefs for a scholarship to the Paris Culinary Academy, would be another jewel in his crown. The menu promised intricate dishes, foie gras tranches, truffle-infused reductions, child's play for a 3-Michelin-star maestro like him. Mr. Laurent, everything's set for the judging, came a quiet voice behind him. He turned to see a young woman in plain kitchen whites, a cream-colored apron tied over a modest gray skirt, her dark hair pulled back in a practical braid. Her name tag read Elena. She was one of Lucille's assistants, likely in her late 20s, with work-worn hands that spoke of tireless labor. "Thank you," Dominic said curtly, barely glancing at her. He was accustomed to being surrounded by admirers, investors, and fellow chefs. Kitchen staff were mere scenery. Elena moved silently among the guests, ensuring water glasses were filled and napkins perfectly folded. She'd worked at Lucille for 3 years, arriving at dawn to scrub pots, chop herbs, and prepare the kitchen for feasts that dazzled the elite. She loved these evenings, though she remained unseen. Something about the aromas that filled these walls stirred her soul in ways she couldn't articulate. Sometimes, when the kitchen was empty, she'd run her fingers over a spice jar, imagining what it would feel like to craft such artistry. Dominic noticed her again as she polished a smudge from a silver tray. Her touch was careful, almost reverent, as if the tools were sacred. How quaint, he thought, smirking. Did she really believe she grasped the sophistication of his craft? In the steamy heart of Lucille's kitchen, with a clatter of pots and the hiss of sizzling pans filled the air, Elena Torres moved like a silent current. The dining hall's elegance faded behind the swinging doors, replaced by a whirlwind of chopping, stirring, and shouting. At 26, Elena's hands, roughened by 3 years of scrubbing pots, worked with a quiet grace, peeling onions with a precision that hinted at something deeper. Her cream-colored apron, tied over a modest gray skirt, bore faint stains of turmeric and grease, a badge of her unseen labor. But her eyes, dark and bright, betrayed a fire within, kindled long ago in a sunlit Mexican village where her mother taught her to weave magic from chiles, corn, and love. Tonight's contest, demanding a dish that bared the chef's soul, set Elena's heart racing. For months, she'd toiled in her cramped Parisian apartment, perfecting her mother's mole poblano, a complex symphony of 20 ingredients, from smoky ancho chiles to bitter chocolate. She learned not in grand culinary schools, but through faded cookbooks and late-night cooking shows on an old, flickering TV, her mother's voice guiding her through each recipe. Her worn notebook, tucked in her skirt pocket, held those dreams, its pages crinkled with spice dust and hope. She'd kept her entry to the competition secret, knowing the polished chefs outside, trained in Michelin kitchens, would mock a dishwasher's ambition. As she polished a stack of plates, Elena stole glances through the kitchen pass at the contestants, their stations gleaming with saffron and truffles. She knew their techniques, emulsions, reductions, not from classrooms but from relentless study, her fingers tracing recipes in the air. Dominic Lawrence's voice boomed from the dining hall, declaring, "Cuisine is an art forged in sacrifice." The words cut deep, as if challenging her right to dream. She paused, wiping sweat from her brow, catching her reflection in a polished kettle. It wasn't just her face, it was her mother's eyes, urging her to claim her place. When she fumbled a ladle, its clatter drew Dominic's sharp gaze. He strode to the pass, his shadow looming over the chaos. "Careful, girl," he said, his voice laced with disdain. "This kitchen's worth more than your village's market." Elena's cheeks burned, but she met his eyes briefly. "Yes, sir, I know it's worth," she murmured, returning to her task. The other assistants snickered, but she ignored them, her mind drifting back to her mother's stove, where a pot of mole had once simmered under starlight. She wasn't just here to clean. She was here to cook, to prove her soul belonged among the flames, even if no one saw it yet. The lights dimmed, and Lucille's dining hall became a stage, the air thick with the scent of seared meats and fresh herbs. The culinary contest began, 6 young chefs at their stations, knives flashing with precision. Their dishes, velouté reductions, deconstructed tartares, danced on the edge of art, each vying for the Paris Culinary Academy scholarship. Guests, adorned in velvet and pearls, watched rapt, their whispers hushed by the spectacle. Dominic Laurent glided among the stations, his 3 Michelin-star presence a quiet storm. He tasted a sous vide duck, his voice low but piercing. "Ambitious," he said, "but lacking soul." The chef flinched, recalibrating under his gaze. Dominic's judgments were gospel, capable of crowning kings or crushing dreams. From her post in the kitchen, Elena watched, her heart tethered to the contest. She knew these techniques, emulsions, spherification, from books studied by lamplight. Each dish told a story, and she could taste them in her mind. The tang of citrus, the depth of truffle. Her fingers moved unconsciously, mimicking the chef's motions. She'd cooked her mother's mole poblano countless times in her mind. Its complex layers a mirror of her life. Joy, loss, resilience. "Magnificent, isn't it?" murmured Madame Claire, a critic in a silk shawl, to her companion. "Dominic's palate is unmatched. No one alive craft cuisine like he does." Dominic's tasting continued, each critique a masterstroke. The guests hung on his words, their applause punctuating each completed dish. Elena, hauling a tray of herbs, paused, caught by a contestant's intricate garnish. Her hands itched to create, to blend her own flavors. But when a chef dropped a knife, she darted forward. Retrieving it swiftly, Dominic's eyes snapped to her. "Stay in your place," he said, his voice edged with irritation. "This isn't your stage." The crowd tittered, some craning to see the assistant who dared intrude. Elena's cheeks burned, but she handed the knife back, her voice steady. "Just helping, sir." She retreated, her resolve flickering but unbroken, the fire of her mother's kitchen still burning within. The contest's intensity surged, Lucille's dining hall alive with the clatter of pans and the perfume of roasted spices. The young chefs, faces taut, raced to perfect their dishes, each plate a gamble for glory. Dominic Laurent prowled the floor, his critiques sharp as a blade. He tasted a lobster foam, declaring, "Passable, but forgettable." The chef, Pierre, slumped, eliminated, his dreams dissolving. The crowd gasped, relishing the stakes. Dominic's authority was absolute. His 3 stars a crown, no one dared challenge. But as he scanned the room, his eyes landed on Elena, still in the kitchen, her gaze too intent for a mere assistant. Her quiet focus irked him. A dishwasher presuming to understand his world? How absurd. What could she know of the years of training, the sacrifices, the genius required to master cuisine? It was almost offensive that she stood there, watching as if she belonged. An idea sparked, a chance to restore order, to remind all of who belonged in this rarefied realm. As the applause for a completed dish faded, Dominic remained at the judging table, a sly smile curling his lips. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice rich with amusement, "I see we have an attentive observer who seems quite taken by tonight's contest." All eyes turned to Elena, who froze, a tray of glasses trembling in her hands. Her cheeks flushed as the room's attention pinned her. "You there," Dominic continued, pointing at her, the young woman in the apron. "You're watching so closely. Tell me, do you cook?" The question hung like a trap, poised to snap shut. Elena's heart pounded, the crowd's curious stares await. "A little," she managed, her voice faint. Dominic's smile widened. "A little? How humble. Surely someone so engrossed wouldn't mind showing our esteemed guests a taste of her talents." Laughter rippled through the hall, some guests smirking, others shifting uneasily. Elena protested. "I'm just staff, sir. I need to—" Dominic cut her off, standing, his gesture grand. "Nonsense. Cuisine is for all, isn't it? You wouldn't want to disappoint our generous patrons." The trap was set. Refuse, and she'd seem ungrateful. Accept, and face certain ridicule. Madame Claire leaned forward, intrigued. The crowd whispered, sensing a spectacle. "Come now," Dominic pressed, his tone laced with false warmth. "What's the worst that could happen? Perhaps you've learned some tricks washing dishes." More laughter, though some guests frowned at his cruelty. Elena stood rooted, her mind racing, to her mother's kitchen, her notebook of recipes, her place in this world. She thought of her mother's words. "Cook from your heart, Mija." She set the tray down, stepping forward, her shoes echoing on the marble. Elena stood beside the pristine cooking station, the spotlight harsh against her worn apron. Lucille's dining hall, with its candlelit elegance, felt like a coliseum, the crowd's eyes, some mocking, some curious, boring into her. Dominic Laurent stood back, arms folded, his smirk betting on her collapse. The other chefs, their stations gleaming with exotic tools, cast glances of disdain or pity. The air pulsed with the scent of saffron and seared meat. But Elena felt only the crushing weight of expectation. Her hand shook as she touched the counter, its cool steel a stark contrast to her calloused fingers. She thought of her small apartment, her modest wage, her place in the hierarchy. She thought of her mother's kitchen, where chiles and laughter crafted memories. Her mother's voice rang clear. "Sometimes life gives you a moment to show who you are." Elena took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. Dominic, sensing her pause, leaned in, his voice dripping with mockery. "What will you make, my dear? A soup, perhaps?" The crowd chuckled, expecting a stumble. But Elena lifted her chin, her voice gaining strength. "Mole poblano," she said, "from my mother's recipe." The laughter stopped. Dominic's smile faltered, then returned, sharper. "Mole poblano?" he repeated, disbelief tinging his tone. "A dish that humbles master chefs." "My dear girl, it demands years of skill, finesse. I know what it demands," Elena cut in softly, settling at the station. Her fingers found the ingredients, chiles, spices, chocolate, and for the first time that night, she felt at home. Dominic laughed, but it sounded forced. "Well, let's see what you can do. This will be enlightening." The crowd held its breath, some wincing, anticipating disaster. Others noticed a shift in Elena's posture, the calm certainty in her hands. Dominic stepped back, arms crossed, ready to savor her failure. He imagined the botched sauce, the clumsy plating, the moment she'd realize she was out of her depth. Then he'd step in, offer a patronizing nod, and restore order. "Whenever you're ready," he said, his courtesy a thin veil. Elena closed her eyes, her fingers resting on the chiles. She heard her mother's voice, not in words but in flavors, the mole they'd made together years ago before everything changed. She opened her eyes, faced the sea of doubters, and began to cook. The first scent of toasted ancho chiles rose from Elena's station, cutting through Lucille's dining hall like a quiet hymn. The crowd, poised for amusement, fell silent, their eyes locked on the assistant they dismissed. Dominic Laurent, expecting a fumble, stood rigid, his smirk fading. Elena's hands moved with a grace that belied her worn apron, grinding cloves, melting chocolate, stirring a sauce that shimmered with depth. Her mole poblano wasn't just a dish. It was a story woven from 20 ingredients. Each note of spice and sweetness a chapter of her life. This wasn't the clumsy effort of an amateur. It was the work of someone who'd lived with flavor for years. Dominic's expression shifted from amusement to confusion, then unease. This wasn't possible. The precision, the balance, the soul in her work. As Elena plated her dish, chicken draped and glossy, dark mole sprinkled with sesame seeds, she unveiled nuances even Dominic hadn't considered. The crowd sat transfixed. Madame Claire's mouth parted slightly, her pen still. Guests leaned forward, no longer watching a jest, but witnessing something profound. Elena's hands navigated the complex recipe with ease, her movements fluid, as if the kitchen were an extension of her heart. More than skill, her mold carried raw honesty. Each swirl of sauce spoke of longing, of dreams deferred, of beauty born in a dusty village. The dish became a window into her soul, revealing depths her plain appearance had concealed. Dominic found himself drawn in, against his will, tasting her story in the air. The mole's climax, rich, fiery, tender, left the room breathless. Elena's face, streaked with sweat, glowed with purpose, her hands steady despite the tears in her eyes. The crowd was silent, some moved to tears by the unexpected artistry unfolding. As the final garnish settled, the aroma lingered, a sacred echo in the hall. No one spoke. The silence was so deep, the ticking of a distant clock could be heard. Then Madame Claire rose, her eyes glistening, clapping with a fervor reserved for genius. One by one, the crowd joined, their ovations swelling until it shook the walls. Dominic stood motionless, staring at Elena as if seeing her for the first time. The assistant he'd mocked had just crafted one of the most soul-stirring dishes he'd ever encountered. His assumptions about talent, class, who belonged here, crumbled with each clap. The dining hall of Lucille trembled with applause, a torrent of awe that swept over the candlelit tables and echoed off the marble walls. Elena Torres stood at her cooking station, her mole poblano a quiet miracle, its rich, smoky aroma lingering like a sacred vow. The crowd, food critics, tycoons, and chefs, rose as one, their claps a thunderous hymn to the unexpected. Madame Claire, her silk shawl slipping from her shoulders, led the ovation, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Faces that had smirked with condescension now glowed with reverence, as if they tasted not just a dish, but a glimpse of eternity. Dominic Laurent, the 3 Michelin-star giant, stood rooted, his arms hanging loose, his polished facade cracked. The assistant he'd mocked had woven a spell that upended his world, and the weight of his arrogance pressed heavy on his chest. Elena, her cream-colored apron stained with spice, met the crowd's gaze, her heart caught between disbelief and a fierce pride. In their faces, she saw her mother smile, the warmth of that sunlit Mexican kitchen where chiles and dreams simmered together. Her hands, still dusted with cumin, trembled as she wiped a tear, the weight of the moment sinking in. Dominic stepped forward, his polished shoes slow on the marble, his usual swagger replaced by a raw vulnerability. The hall fell silent, every ear straining to catch the shift. "How long have you been cooking?" he asked, his voice stripped of its cutting edge, almost reverent. "Since I was 7, Elena replied softly, her voice steady despite the tears. "My mother taught me in a kitchen smaller than this pass. She never had a stage like yours." Dominic felt a pang, as if her words had pierced the armor of his privilege. "I owe you an apology," he said, his tone heavy with a sincerity that stunned the room. "What I did tonight was inexcusable." A 3-star chef's humility was as rare as a perfect vintage, and the crowd held its breath. Sensing history, Elena, her dark eyes unwavering, spoke gently. "Cooking doesn't belong to any one of us, sir. It belongs to everyone who pours their heart into it." Her words, simple yet profound, rippled through the hall, stirring souls hardened by wealth and status. Madame Claire nodded, her pen scratching furiously, capturing the moment. A financier in the crowd glanced at his wife, questioning the assumptions he'd never voiced. A socialite clutched her pearls, wondering about the cook in her own home. Dominic, humbled in a way he'd never known, gestured to the kitchen. The competition is over, but Lucille's gala dinner waits. Would you grace us with more of your dishes? Our guests deserve your gift. His voice carried respect, not mockery, a plea born of newfound awe. The crowd erupted, voices rising in a chorus. Yes, Elena. Please cook, Madame Claire called out. We want more. Elena hesitated, her mind flashing to years of scrubbing pots, nights perfecting recipes by lamplight, the weight of her mother's dreams. Your food is your heart, Mija, her mother's voice whispered. She nodded, her voice soft but firm. I'd be honored. Dominic extended a hand, not as a master, but an equal, and Elena took it, her callous palm meeting his. The gesture sealed a transformation, not just for them, but for every soul in the hall, now questioning the invisible lines they'd drawn between worth and work. The candlelit glow of Lucille's dining hall softened, its marble walls warmed by a new kind of reverence as the gala dinner began. With Dominic Lawrence's quiet nod, Elena Torres took command of the kitchen, no longer the unseen assistant, but a creator of wonders. Her menu, a tapestry of Mexican heritage woven with Parisian grace, unfolded like a lullaby. The air filled with the earthy perfume of roasted chiles, the bright zest of lime, and the sweet whisper of caramelized sugar, each scent a verse from her life. She of her own, she plated tamales, their corn husks cradling tender pork laced with her mother's secret blend of ancho and cumin, a dish born in dusty village evenings. Next came a ceviche, its fish kissed by citrus and mango, evoking sunlit riverbanks of her childhood. For dessert, a flan, its golden caramel a mirror of her mother's laughter over a flickering stove. The crowd, critics, tycoons, and culinary luminaries, fell silent, their forks moving in unison, as if under a spell. Madame Claire, her stern critic's mask dissolved, closed her eyes at the first bite of tamale, murmuring, "This is poetry on a plate." Her words carried, stirring nods among the diners, some brushing away tears as the flavors unlocked memories they hadn't known they held. A banker, his suit crisp, tasted the ceviche and thought of his grandmother's kitchen, a place he'd long dismissed. A socialite, her pearls gleaming, questioned why she'd never asked her own cook's story. Her heart stirred by the flan's tender sweetness. Dominic stood at the hall's edge, his usual air of command replaced by quiet awe. Elena's dishes weren't just masterful. They were alive, pulsing with a soul that rekindled his own forgotten love for cooking. He remembered his early days, stirring sauces in a modest bistro before fame clouded his joy. Her food was a mirror, reflecting what he'd lost to pride. The diners, too, felt the shift. A critic reconsidered the assistants he passed daily, wondering what gifts they hid. A patron, moved by the tamales' warmth, vowed to see beyond titles. Elena's plates turned Lucille's lofty hall into a shared hearth, where class and status melted under the universal language of flavor. As the last dishes were cleared, the applause erupted, a roar of gratitude that shook the gilded walls. Elena stepped forward, her cream-colored apron now a badge of triumph, and bowed, her face flushed with shy pride. She was no longer invisible, but a beacon, her mother's voice echoing in every clap. Your food is your heart, Mija. Dominic met her gaze, his nod carrying a respect he'd never offered before. The night belonged to her, a testament that true artistry, born from struggle and love, could transform even the most guarded hearts. Lucille, once a fortress of privilege, had become a stage for the human spirit, lit by the fire of Elena's creations. 6 months later, Elena Torres walked across Lucille's marble floors, no longer in an apron but a tailored chef's coat. Her name embroidered, Elena Torres, head chef. The dining hall, once a fortress of privilege, now hummed with warmth, packed with diners drawn by her legend. Her menu, a fusion of Mexican soul and Parisian elegance, was printed in delicate script, each dish a tribute to her roots. Posters outside heralded her debut, backed by a scholarship fund Dominic had created for hidden talents. The crowd, critics, locals, food lovers, buzzed, eager for the assistant who'd stun the world. Elena posed, her eyes sweeping the room. She was the same woman who'd scrubbed pots, yet everything had shifted. Madame Claire approached, beaming. "My dear, to think you were cleaning our dishes 6 months ago." Elena smiled. "I'm still me, just with better pans now." Dominic appeared, no longer the haughty star, but a minter, his silver hair catching the candlelight. His foundation now sought out talents in overlooked places inspired by Elena. Tonight, he'd assist her, a quiet reversal of roles. As Elena took her place in the kitchen, she thought of her mother's death, which had once buried her dreams. Years of practice in a cramped apartment, blending spices by lamplight, had led here. She began with her mole poblano, its aroma a hymn to her past. The diners savored each bite, their applause a chorus of awe. Dominic watched, a tear falling. Elena's food had rekindled his love for cooking, stripped of ego. The crowd rose, their ovation a celebration of second chances. Elena, her eyes bright, felt her mother's presence, a whisper that dreams endure, waiting for courage to set them free. Elena Torres's story lingers like the final bite of a perfect dish, its warmth settling in your soul. From a dishwasher in Lucille's shadows, she rose to head chef. Her mole poblano proof that love and grit can outshine any star. Dominic, the titan who mocked her, found redemption in her light, learning that true art lives in the heart, not hierarchy. This isn't just a tale of food. It's a call to see the unseen, to cherish the dreams behind humble faces. Have you ever met someone whose gift surprised you? A coworker, a friend, or even you? What talents have you overlooked? Share your stories in the comments. We read every one, and they fuel our next tale. If Elena's journey touched you, hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe with the bell icon. Your support keeps these stories alive. Tonight, Lucille's candlelit hall bears Elena's mark, her dishes uniting strangers across cultures. She showed us a recipe is more than ingredients. It's a story, a memory, a bridge. Dominic, once blinded by pride, now seeks others like her, his foundation a light for the overlooked. Elena's truth is clear. Greatness needs only courage, not a stage. Where are you watching from? Drop your city below and tell us about the unsung heroes in your life, cooking, creating, or enduring, waiting for their moment. Keep your heart open, because the next masterpiece might be simmering beside you. Until our next story, savor the beauty of second chances and the flavors that make us human.